The rain had been falling for hours that night, turning the quiet streets into rivers of reflections. Inside the massive glass mansion on the hill, a man who owned half the city sat alone in complete silence. His name was Adrian Hale, one of the youngest billionaires in the country, a man whose face appeared on magazine covers and business channels almost every week. People admired his success, envied his wealth, and praised his intelligence. But none of them knew the truth. Adrian Hale had everything, except love. The house that cost millions felt colder than the storm outside. The dining table built for 10 people had only one plate on it every night. The marble floors echoed with the sound of his footsteps because no one else walked beside him. The world respected him, but the people he loved had slowly disappeared. Before the story continues, if you believe that kindness, second chances, and genuine human connection still matter in this world, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs inspiration, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the most unexpected people can change our lives forever. Adrian had not always been lonely. Years ago, when he was still building his empire, he had been deeply in love with a woman named Victoria. She had been elegant, intelligent, and charming in a way that captured the attention of every room she entered. Adrian believed she loved him for who he was. For years, he worked day and night to grow his company, imagining a future where success would bring them happiness. But success brought something else instead. The more money Adrian earned, the more distant Victoria became. Their conversations grew shorter, colder, more calculated. She attended charity galas without him, traveled to luxury resorts alone, and began surrounding herself with people who cared more about status than sincerity. Then one evening, everything shattered. Adrian returned home early from a business trip, hoping to surprise her with dinner. Instead, he found the house empty except for a note sitting on the kitchen counter. Victoria had left. No explanation, no goodbye, just a simple message saying she needed a life filled with excitement, freedom, and people who understood her lifestyle. Later, Adrian learned the truth from business circles. She had moved overseas with a wealthy investor who owned private islands and luxury yachts. In a single moment, the love Adrian believed in had revealed itself to be nothing more than admiration for his money. That was the night Adrian stopped believing in people. Months passed, then years. His business expanded rapidly, and his wealth multiplied faster than anyone expected. But his personal life became smaller and quieter. Friends slowly faded away, replaced by employees and assistants who treated him like a walking corporation rather than a human being. The mansion became more of an office than a home. He hired chefs who prepared meals he barely tasted, drivers who drove him to meetings he barely remembered, and security guards who watched over a man who had nothing left worth protecting except his fortune. But among all those employees, there was one person Adrian barely noticed. Her name was Elena. Elena worked as a maid in the mansion. She had been hired quietly by the house manager after the previous cleaning staff left. She was not particularly noticeable at first glance. She was small, soft-spoken, and always dressed in simple clothing that blended into the background of the house's luxurious interior. Every morning, she arrived before sunrise. She cleaned the hallways, dusted the shelves filled with expensive art, and carefully arranged everything exactly as it had been before. She moved quietly, almost invisibly. For Adrian, she was just another employee. But Elena noticed something no one else seemed to care about. She noticed that Adrian never finished his meals. She noticed that the lights in his office stayed on until 2 or 3 in the morning. She noticed that the television in the living room was always playing quietly even though no one was watching it. And most importantly, she noticed the silence. The silence in that house wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. One night, Elena arrived earlier than usual because of a storm that made transportation unpredictable. As she walked through the house, she saw Adrian sitting in the dark living room, staring at the rain pouring against the glass walls. He looked exhausted. Not the kind of exhaustion that sleep could fix, but the kind that came from carrying invisible weight for too long. Elena hesitated. She knew employees were not supposed to disturb the owner. But something about the moment felt different. Without saying anything, she quietly walked to the kitchen and prepared a simple cup of tea. It wasn't expensive tea imported from luxury markets like the chef used. It was just a warm, comforting drink she used to make for her own father years ago. She placed the cup on the table near Adrian and gently stepped back. Adrian looked surprised. For a moment, he almost spoke, but Elena simply nodded politely and returned to her cleaning duties. The next day, something unusual happened. Adrian finished his entire dinner. The chef thought it was a coincidence. But the same thing happened the following evening when Elena again left a simple cup of tea on the table without interrupting him. Weeks passed, and slowly a quiet routine developed. Elena never tried to talk to Adrian. She never asked personal questions. She never tried to impress him or gain his attention. She simply did small things that no one else cared enough to notice. Sometimes she left fresh flowers in the study. Sometimes she placed a warm blanket on the chair where Adrian worked late at night. Sometimes she replaced the television channel with calming music instead of loud news debates. Adrian never mentioned it directly, but he noticed every detail. And something inside him began to change. For the first time in years, the house felt slightly less empty. But life rarely changes without testing people first. One afternoon, Adrian received a call from an old acquaintance in the business world. Victoria had returned to the city. Apparently, her new relationship had ended after the investor lost a large portion of his fortune. Without the luxury lifestyle she had grown used to, Victoria had started reconnecting with people from her past. Including Adrian. A few days later, she appeared at his office building unexpectedly. She looked exactly the same, elegant, confident, perfectly dressed. But Adrian saw something different now. The charm that once captivated him felt hollow. Victoria spoke about memories, about regret, about second chances. She said she had made mistakes. She said she missed the life they had together. She said Adrian was the only man who ever truly loved her. For a moment, Adrian felt the old emotions stirring. But then he remembered the empty house, the years of silence, and the note she had left behind. That evening, Adrian returned home later than usual. He walked through the quiet halls until he reached the kitchen, where Elena was finishing her work before leaving. For the first time since she started working there, Adrian spoke directly to her. Not with authority, but with genuine curiosity. He asked why she always left tea for him. Elena looked slightly embarrassed. She explained that when her father worked long hours, he often forgot to rest or eat properly. Tea had been her small way of reminding him that someone cared. She said she noticed Adrian worked the same way. Her answer was simple, honest. No hidden intention, no expectation of reward. In that moment, Adrian realized something that shocked him. For years, the world had respected his money, his power, and his success. But this quiet maid respected him as a human being. Not as a billionaire. Not as a powerful businessman. Just as a tired man who needed warmth in a cold house. That realization changed everything. Adrian began spending less time at the office and more time at home. The mansion slowly became brighter. The lights stayed on in the evenings not because of work, but because the rooms were finally being lived in. Elena continued her work just as before, never expecting anything more than her simple salary. But Adrian began to see the world differently. He started funding small community programs, supporting local shelters, and helping families who were struggling. Not for publicity, but because Elena had reminded him that kindness still existed in quiet places. One day, Adrian offered Elena a new position managing the household staff, with a much higher salary. She was shocked, but grateful. Months later, Victoria tried to contact Adrian again, but by then something important had already happened. Adrian had learned the difference between admiration and respect. One was attracted to wealth. The other cared about humanity. And only one of them had been present during his darkest years. Before we reach the end of this story, here's a special request. Comment below with the word kindness if you believe that even the smallest acts of care can change someone's life. Because sometimes a simple cup of tea can save a broken heart. Years passed, and Adrian's life transformed in ways he never expected. The mansion that once felt like an empty museum slowly became a place filled with warmth, laughter, and real human connection. And the most surprising part, the person who helped rebuild that life had once been someone the world barely noticed. A maid who saw a lonely man behind the billionaire title. A quiet reminder that respect doesn't come from wealth, power, or fame. It comes from compassion. And sometimes, the person who changes your life forever is the one who simply chooses to care when no one else does. If this story touched your heart even a little, take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this. Because in a world chasing money and status, the greatest treasure will always be a human heart that chooses kindness.